Intense fighting continues between Ethiopian government troops and Tigrayan rebels. Ethiopians recently held a rally in support of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government. The demonstrators also condemned foreign powers and their media outlets, especially the United States, for supporting the rebels. They rejected U.S. demands that the government hold talks with the TPLF rebels.
They want to destroy our country like they did Afghanistan. They will never succeed. We are Ethiopians. We are children of Adwa. With which TPLF are we going to negotiate? The one that killed and raped us? One that stabbed our mothers and fathers with combat knives? We will never, ever negotiate with them.
Hello, I'm Mubarak Kenya, and a warm welcome to Africa Today, a weekly program which gives you an alternative view of events making headlines in Africa. This week, we are focusing on the security crisis in Ethiopia amid reports that the United States is backing rebels planning to topple the government there. In the second part of our show, we take stock of the recently concluded UN Climate Change Conference in Glasgow to see if there was any benefit for the African people who are suffering due to carbon dioxide emissions from industrialized countries, especially in the West. So stay with us till the end of our show and send your comments through our social media handle as you watch.
Ethiopia crisis and US meddling. November last year, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed sent troops into Tigray to topple the Tigray People's Liberation Front, or the TPLF, which was the ruling party in the autonomous region. The Prime Minister justified the move and said it was in response to corruption and human rights violations.
The federal government had every right to deploy federal security forces and use force in order to apprehend those implicated in massive corruption and gross human rights violation.
Meanwhile, the African Union High Representative for the Horn of Africa, Olusegun Obasanjo, addressed the United Nations Security Council via video link and said the warring parties agree on the need for a political solution.
All these leaders here in Addis Ababa and in the north agree individually that the difference between them are political and require political solution through dialogue. This, therefore, constitutes a window of opportunity.
Now, for more on the unfolding situation in Ethiopia and foreign meddling in the conflict, my colleague contacted Dr. Mohammed Hassan, an Ethiopian historian and former diplomat. He is currently the advisor to the president of the Somali regional state in Ethiopia. Dr. Hassan started by briefly stating the main agenda of the TPLF rebels and what exactly they are pursuing in this conflict. Let's take a listen.
In all this time, is United States and European Union was behind the TPLF because they consider when the TPLF in power in Ethiopia that it is their surrogate regime. The TPLF does what the United States wishes and European Union wishes. Or their major objective is that to remain in power and become an agent of the external power. As you know, that Ethiopia today is about 110 million. Since Prime Minister Abiy came to power, and finally, as the West says, that one of the parameters they consider a democratic country is it have to organize an election. And election was organized, and Dr. Abiy was elected overwhelmingly, he and his party. So finally now, with the support of external forces, they entered and waging in the other provinces of Ethiopia. And I will assure you that the Ethiopian people now, they are highly organized, mobilized to defend their country. And I'm very sure that in short time period, or in a short period, these bandits and this surrogate element.
On the 7th of November, tens of thousands of Ethiopians pledged to defend the capital from rebels during a pro-government rally in Addis Ababa. Now, the demonstrators also denounced the United States government for backing the TPLF rebels. Addressing the Mammoth rally, Addis Ababa mayor stressed that Ethiopians reject a puppet government.
በዲሞክራሲያዊ መብታቸው ተጠቅመው They were electing their leaders democratically, but they tell us we have to get their approval for us to form a government. They are even showing us their wish of putting on us a puppet government. That will never succeed and will never happen here.
Ethiopians have condemned the United States and other foreign actors for meddling in their country. So the question many are asking is, why are external powers interfering in Ethiopia?
These forces which you are asking me, it is United States and Europe. There is nobody else. These are the forces who doesn't want us, we in the Horn of Africa, to have peace, to work together and to change the life of our population. We have no border with these people. They are very far away from us, more than 10,000 kilometers of Europeans, and United States, maybe it will be 30,000 kilometers. But they wanted to dominate the African people and they wanted to loot the African resources. But that is gone. That time is gone.
Ethiopians also protested against Western media outlets, especially BBC and CNN, that are exaggerating the advances by TPLF rebels. A journalist working for Sputnik News in Addis Ababa has debunked the fake news being disseminated by Western media regarding the current situation in Ethiopia. He spoke to a local TV station during the anti-US rally in Addis Ababa.
The reports that most Western media are putting out are not accurate. The Western media, for many reasons, are supporting the TPLF and talking about a security situation in Addis Ababa that's not accurate. Addis Ababa right now is peaceful, with tens of thousands of people coming out to Meskel Square in support of the Ethiopian government, in support of the democratically elected and legitimate government of Ethiopia. And I've had a wonderful stay and met so many wonderful people here while I've been in Addis.
Dr. Hassan says TPLF has been getting all-out support from Western countries, including favorable media coverage.
These are a bunch of thieves who have stolen more than $40 billion from the Ethiopian people, and they also always lived by a life support machine and oxygen which is given for them from United States and Europe. And they support these thugs by satellite, support them by diplomacy, support them by putting propaganda in order to weaken the Ethiopians, that it is, whether it is CNN, Washington Post, New York Times, all their imperialist media gang up against Ethiopia and also the government of Dr. Abiy.
Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has been leading efforts for regional integration in the Horn of Africa. Speaking last year during the opening of Kenya's new megaport in Lamu, he said regional integration is the only way to survive in a competitive world.
Without economic integration, there is no way that we can survive in 21st century, just like in 20th century. That's very difficult for us, so we have to work hand in hand to change the life of our citizens. Also, we can easily transform Horn of Africa as long as each government is dedicated their time and resource to invest on infrastructure like my brother did here in Kenya.
Abiy Ahmed's initiative of regional integration in the Horn of Africa is certainly contrary to the imperialist policy of divide and rule. We asked Dr. Hassan if this initiative has been successful.
This idea, the new Horn of Africa, it is 70 years ago it came up through the struggle of the people there and the struggle of Eritrean people and so on. This concept, it is not today, it just came, it is an old and so on, to liberate the region from the clash of external forces. Once that the external forces' hand is weakened or removed, then the contradiction among the people there can be resolved democratically and the states can work together. And this is what it frightens the imperialist forces. If all these countries can unite and work together and minimize their contradiction, they have a very huge resources and they have a huge human resources. And if they can mobilize that, then they can improve the life of their population and they can bring a safe region and a safe neighborhood.
Ethiopia is said to have some of the largest deposits of natural gas compared to most countries in Africa. Despite all this potential, natural gas has not been properly exploited yet. Despite having vast natural resources in the country, Ethiopia is so much dependent on foreign aid, which is often used as a pressure tool by foreign powers. So what could be the reason behind this state of affairs?
Because of the previous ruling class themselves, they are agent and dependent of the external forces. They don't stand for the interest of their own people, they stand for the interest of external forces. That is why the country became dependent. That is why Dr. Abiy, he changed the course of the country, and he says we can work together, we can develop together, we can make peace in the region, and that was not disliked.
The government of Ethiopia has laid out conditions for possible talks with the rebels, including a halt to attacks, a TPLF withdrawal from the neighboring areas of Amhara and Afar, and recognition of the government's legitimacy. Now, we finally asked Dr. Hassan his take on the future of the ongoing conflict in Ethiopia.
The imperialists and the imperialist multinationals, they cannot dominate us and they cannot exploit our resources. And that is the main struggle today. By supporting an internal enemy, a surrogate, a backward of the Middle Ages mentality, in order, in the name of Tigrayan people, they wanted to promote their interest and overthrow the government of Dr. Abiy. But that is not possible. Ethiopians, about 110 million, they are united with him and they will fight and defend their national sovereignty. I repeat for you, they will fight and defend their national sovereignty. Ethiopia has been tested several times by external forces or by surrogate forces, but it prevailed. And now the ruling class is becoming to a certain extent patriotic and wants to defend the national interest. And this national interest is muqaddas, it cannot be touched. It is holy.
Well, there you have it. Dr. Mohammed Hassan, an Ethiopian historian and former diplomat, says Ethiopians will continue defending their national interests. Thanks a lot, sir, for your time. Now, we now take a short break, and when we come back, we shall look into the recent climate change summit in Glasgow, Scotland, and the debt Western countries owe to Africa. Stay with us.
Climate change and the West's debt to Africa.
During the recent 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, more commonly referred to as COP26, held in Glasgow, several African leaders spoke to demand climate justice. After 2 weeks of deliberations, few of their requests feature in the final agreement announced on the 13th of November.
Although Africa has contributed the least to climate change, is already experiencing devastating climate impacts and will bear the brunt of future global warming. Speaking before the start of the climate summit in Glasgow, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa spoke on what developed countries need to do to compensate African countries.
We want your more developed economies that have been responsible for the greatest emissions in the world to be the ones who will live up to the offers that they have made in the past. The offers to help the transition by more developing economies by offering the assistance, the mitigation, the money, and the grants, as well as concessional funding.
For more on the burning issue of climate change, we contacted Nimo Basay, an environmental activist, author, and director of Health of Mother Earth Foundation. Now, before we go to our guest, let's take a listen to President Lazarus Chakwera of Malawi when he spoke at the UN Climate Summit in Glasgow.
When the nations we lead ask, what exactly is the point of this conference? What they are really asking is this: what is the point of having you go to COP26 on our behalf? If you are going to Glasgow for COP26 should we expect you to come back with real solutions on climate change? Or should we just ask the Scottish government to keep you for good because you are part of the problem?
Now, in view of the remarks by the President of Malawi, we asked Mr. Bassey his opinion on the Glasgow summit and what benefit, if any, did African countries get from the conference.
Strictly speaking, it can be said that African nations don't really benefit from going to the Conference of Parties, particularly considering the outcome of COP26. Many of the COPs have added up over time to place more burdens on vulnerable countries, vulnerable regions like Africa. And anything that lifts up, that presents 1.5 degrees Celsius as temperature increase target is actually unfair to Africa. What do our leaders get by going to the Conference of Parties? They go there for technical assistance, for financial assistance. They're not getting any of that.
In another part of his speech during the Glasgow Climate Change Conference, Malawi's president said industrialized countries are not doing African countries a favor by funding projects aimed at climate change mitigation. Let's take a listen.
We must answer them with the immediate disbursement of the money pledged to least developed countries by developed nations, which is not a donation, but a cleaning fee.
Several African countries are suffering from disasters such as drought and floods due to extreme weather patterns caused by long-term global climate change. What's the responsibility of big emitters of carbon dioxide, especially the United States, in this regard?
The basic principles of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is anchored on justice and captured as common but differentiated responsibilities. In other words, although global warming is general, some people are more responsible for the other. That does not mean just accepting the fact that they've created this problem, but also accepting responsibility. And that means stopping the increase of greenhouse gas to the atmosphere and also providing the funds to build adaptation, to build resilience, and to help those who are already being drowned in floods, who are suffering from droughts, who are having food issues, famines, and all kinds of negative impacts. Africa is not responsible, but Africa is suffering the impacts.
Despite its low contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, Africa remains the most vulnerable continent to climate change impacts. Now, why is Africa vulnerable to climate variability and change compared with many other regions?
Africa is more vulnerable to climate variability and change compared with many other regions because of her geographical location. The equator passes through almost the middle of Africa. And this means that a very big chunk of Africa's landmass is more or less on the hotspot. Then Africa is totally surrounded by water body, by oceans and the Mediterranean Sea. Global warming is leading to higher warming of the oceans. So that's giving us more cyclones, more deadly cyclones like what has been hitting the southeastern coast of Africa. And the temperature increase is much more on African continent than elsewhere. In fact, it is said that Africa suffers about 50% more temperature increase than the global average.
A 26-year-old climate and environmental activist from Kenya, Elizabeth Wathuti, addressed the world leaders at the Glasgow conference and said Sub-Saharan Africa is in danger.
I have seen with my own eyes 3 young children crying at the side of a dried-up river after walking 12 miles with their mother to find water. Please open your hearts. This is not only happening in Kenya. Over the past few months, there have been deadly heat waves and wildfires in Algeria and devastating floods in Uganda and Nigeria. And there is more still to come. By 2025, in just 4 years' time, half of the world's population will be facing water scarcity. And by the time I'm 50, the climate crisis will have displaced 86 million people in Sub-Saharan Africa alone.
The future looks quite bleak, so what urgent action is required to avert disasters in African countries affected by natural disasters caused by climate change?
Many of the pledges made by nations is about achieving certain levels of carbon greenhouse emission reduction by 2050, by 2060, by 2070, and all are based on nationally determined contributions, which is what will be convenient for politicians to do way down the road. We don't have 30 years to wait before action is taken. We don't have 40 years to wait. The problem is now, and the action is needed to be taken now. And so what should be done to help Africa is to follow the science. Stop searching for new fossil fuel resources. Stop digging for coal. Stop drilling for oil. Stop drilling for gas. We could tolerate African nations having a little more time for the transition, but the rich, powerful nations who have contributed to the crisis, to the global crisis, should transit immediately from dependence on fossil fuels. They have the resources, they have the technology, and they can do it. We don't have to continue depending on a destructive energy regime just because it's convenient for fossil fuel industries.
African rainforests take carbon from the atmosphere and produce oxygen, and thus they are often referred to as the lungs of the world.
Western countries that are leading emitters of carbon dioxide are involved in depleting these forests through logging and industrial farming. Now, do Western countries merely pay lip service when they claim to care for the environment?
We don't see that happening. What we're seeing is manipulation of climate negotiation documents to give leeway for industrialized nations to deploy technologies, unproven technologies, like geoengineering technologies, which they now refer to as intervention kind of technologies, climate intervention, which would mean solar radiation management, means depending on carbon capture and storage. It also means depending more on carbon trading and so-called carbon offsetting. So rich countries will continue to pollute and pay for forests, displaced communities who depend on forests, and claim that the carbon that they're emitting, the equivalent of the carbon they're emitting, is captured by the forests in Africa or somewhere. And so as long as industrialized nations continue to pull the strings in climate discussions, as long as they continue to push towards new unproven technologies as solutions to global warming, it means they are entrenching business as usual, entrenching the use of fossil fuels. They are not in any way driving the world in a direction of renewable, safe, clean energy and safe food. This is tragic.
While Nimo Basedia believes that the recent climate change conference in Glasgow will have no positive impact and it's business as usual. What's your opinion? Drop us a line through our social media handle and let us know what you think. That's it for this week's edition of Africa Today. You can watch this episode and our previous shows on our website, presstv.ir. It was great having you, and thanks a lot for watching. Goodbye for now, and God bless you.